What's going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with a Thursday night football preview between the Saints and the Cardinals. Going to break down a few of the different ways the game might unfold, a few game scripts, as the hip guys will call them out there, a player-by-player breakdown, some injury analysis to see what some of the pieces of value might end up being if we get a few guys rolled out. All the sort of things you need to know heading into the Thursday night slate. So with a lot to talk about, let's not waste any time at all and get this thing started. A couple housekeeping notes before we hop into a player-by-player analysis. We got a 44-point over-under, a 2-point spread favoring the Cardinals, and overall, it doesn't look like Vegas is very sold on either offense, and they really have a lot of reason to follow that because either offense has been extremely inefficient. Now that you have Jameis Winston hurt, Andy Dalton was thrust into the starting spot. Clearly wasn't all prepared to do so because they have been kind of lackluster the last few weeks. On the other side, Cliff Kingsbury is already on the hot seat and it's only a third of the way into the season. So clearly a little bit of a dumpster fire on both sides. And you can see that reflected with the over-under because Cardinals defense can't stop a leak. And on the other side, the Saints defense has underperformed, compared to different past years' performance. So overall, you're looking at two teams that are really struggling. If either team wants to make the playoffs, they certainly have to win this game. So there's a few different game scripts that I think we should touch on. And really, this is probably the most important part of the video. I think that you're not going to see a shootout here, pretty much no matter what. Both teams have been inefficient, and for them to turn it around, Cliff Kingsbury to finally start calling the right plays, and for Andy Dalton and that offense to all click on the same page, I just don't see that 50, 60 point total. I see either an onslaught for either team where the Saints go out there, win this handedly, or on the other side, potentially the Cardinals at home winning this handedly, or a game where it's really low scoring. I don't see both teams having a ceiling performance at the same time. So the sort of scripts I'm working with are either, like I said, an onslaught for one side or the other, like a 4-2 or a 5-1, or just running a lot of defenses and kickers and just hoping that both offenses can't get it done. Those are the sort of scripts that I think are active. And anytime you have a close game, anytime you just have quarterbacks on a showdown slate, people are going to try and jam them in. And if I'm playing an onslaught of one team or the other, I'm not going to play both quarterbacks, right? If you're doing so, you have to stack at least 1-2 wide receivers with the quarterback. And that's really limiting your choices, kind of cornering yourself with a lot of the field if you're going in that direction. And usually those are only viable in a higher scoring script. And if I'm looking for the lower scoring where both teams are relatively inefficient, I don't want to play both quarterbacks in that. It's going to be a lot of running backs, kickers, defenses, that sort of thing. So the both quarterback build where I'm having both of them in the same lineup is pretty much not going to be a thing for me. I'm not going to have to set a role for it just based on some of the projections that I'll be running out there. Outside of that, for the Cardinals-led scripts, we'll talk about some of my favorite players there, but it's a lot of the skill position guys at captain, a lot of Kyler Murray used in those sort of lineups. And on the flip side, using buybacks with some of the wide receivers, right? If you're trying to take a lower scoring team, you're going to have to take either that possession wide receiver who gets you 7 or 8 catches and 80 yards. That would be a solid buyback, or that one player that scores a touchdown. So it's going to be a lot of Chris Olave for me when I'm taking Cardinal stacks. And on the flip side, when I'm going out there playing Andy Dalton alongside players like an Olave and Alvin Kamara, I'm running it back with potentially a Hopkins, but a little bit cheaper, like a Rondale Moore, a Zach Ertz, that are getting that PPR sort of production. Because again, my game script, and this is what I want to focus on right here, is either one team is getting it done or both teams are struggling. So it's not like I want to go out there and target the tip-top players as buybacks for those sort of situations, because we're expecting the whole offense in general to really struggle. So just wanted to touch on that from the beginning. A few injury notes here too. James Conner and Eno Benjamin are both questionable. Now, James Conner is not being able to practice very much. Eno Benjamin has at least practiced in limited fashion to this point. So I'm kind of siding towards Eno is probably going to get the start here. James Conner is probably out again, but we'll have to see. It's a short turnaround here for Thursday night. Chris Olave has said that he will play, so he'll be in there. And a few other smaller guys injured. I think Keith Kirkwood is questionable. And I think that's it. There might be a few other guys. You also have Robbie Anderson, who was just added to the Cardinals this week. We don't know if he's going to get a bunch of playing time or not. You can see as of right now, I'm not expecting him to. Just a few things that we're going to have to keep tabs on, right? From the injury perspective, and of course, Robbie Anderson being added. Just let's go player by player now, right? Let's talk about the nitty gritty, how I'm implementing some of these players. I have both quarterbacks in my pool. I'm going to lump them together here. Murray at 11-2 and Andy Dalton at 9-4. If I was going to take one at captain, I would prefer Kyler Murray by far, but I don't see myself getting to either just because he is so expensive up there. And the differentiating factor is the rushing ability, right? Kyler Murray is a top 10 rusher at the quarterback position in the NFL. And last week, right, when he's going out there getting us 10 plus carries, is a top 5 or even top 3 rusher in the NFL at quarterback. Just doesn't always get that run, but when he does, he is viable in that spot. So I don't want to completely write him off there, right? I definitely think you're okay using him there if you want to. Just guys I like a little bit more. So it's going to be a lot of the onslaught lineups where I'm getting to either quarterback. In the lower scoring scripts, I might mix in a Murray just because of that rushing upside, but it really is going to be hard to get to an Andy Dalton because he's going to do it all through the air. And for a quarterback at 9,400 to get to the optimal, even in a low scoring script, you need at least like 13 points. And that's, being a little bit generous, right? You're probably going to need a little bit more than that to get into the optimal. I'm, kind of sticking to Andy Dalton in my Saints heavy stacks, whereas Kyler Murray I'm being a little bit more flexible with just because he does have that rushing upside. The wide receivers up top, including Alvin Kamara, who I'm going to kind of call a wide receiver here too, I'm mixing in with their respective quarterbacks, right? So in onslaught lineups, that's where I'm getting to a lot of these 10K players. And Alvin Kamara, I'm willing to use him with an Andy Dalton because he has so much PPR upside. Here on a Draftkings, Kamara is going to see usually 5+ targets a game, which is the equivalent of at least like 7 to 8 fantasy points most times out, if not more, if it results in a touchdown. So 10,600, I like him. I also like DeAndre Hopkins and potentially even at the captain slot. And usually I'm going to leave these guys at captain in the onslaught lineup. So if I'm going with an Arizona onslaught, I'll be willing to play Hopkins. I'm not sure if I'm going to be willing to play Kamara in an Arizona sort of onslaught because, again, I think that it's either going to be one team going off or both teams sucking in this sort of scenario. And for the player that is in the losing team to get to the optimal, they're going to have to do absolutely everything for that offense, which is just a very low percentage outcome. So I like the two players, but I like them when we're going with the team side, the stack side. We're going to have to see with the running backs here. If Benjamin is starting, he's an okay play at that price tag. If James Conner is starting, he's also an okay play at that price tag. But we don't have enough information as of right now, so I have them projected pretty much at the same level. And their ownership is going to change drastically if one is out versus the other, right? You can almost combine the ownership here. That's pretty much what's going to happen in my algorithm when he ends up getting rolled in or out, one player or the other. And if they're both out, then we're going to have a situation down low where we're going to have an extremely cheap running back to use as value. And we honestly don't even know who that player would be. Like, we know a few choices. We know there's a few of them that have gone touches to this point, but they could use a 2 to 3 running back rotation if both of those guys are out. It could be really wacky. So we're going to have to keep tabs on that. Some of the beat reporters putting out information will have to follow. That's all I've got for you on those two. So Olave will play. I love him here, $7,400. He's been extremely efficient for the Saints to this point and has clear rapport with Andy Dalton. So you have to like that. He has said that he's completely fine and over the concussion, and I tend to believe players when they do so. So really nothing to hold us back there. But Taysom Hill at 7,200, he may also make it into the captain pool because he brings that rushing upside. He's got a low floor, but damn does he have a high ceiling. And in the 7K range, you really just need 20, maybe 25 fantasy points at the very most to be that optimal captain. Let alone something closer to like 18 to 20. A lot of times will get it done because that's 30 points at the captain slot. And you're saving a lot of salary by getting to one of these players. And you're usually able to spend up for at least one extra stud. So it's definitely got a lot of reasons to get to it, right? A lot of attractive points to play these 7K guys at captain. So he may actually make it into the captain pool. You have to check on Patreon. I'll remind you guys, these are just my early projections, right? When, one of these running backs is rolled out, if it ends up happening, if we get a few other surprise actives or inactives, ownership projections for each team because of usage is going to change drastically, right? So if you want to stay up to date on all of that, it is on the Patreon page and always will be posted. So that's where you'll find it. Had to do the shameless plug at some point. point, right, boys? Let's move on here to the true value tier options. So I'd say, the bottom end of that value tier in the 7K is a Zach Ertz. Love him at captain too. Kind of mentioned, like if I'm taking a buyback option, I want some of these PPR beasts, right? So kind of like a Zach Ertz, a Rondale Moore down here, Chris Olave, and I mean, I guess that's really it. There's not a whole bunch of PPR awesome beasts in this game. Those are the sort of guys I want to use as a buyback because in an inefficient offense, that's where a lot of your fantasy production is going to come from. And even for running backs, right? Running backs in an inefficient offense usually put up next to no points on the ground. Almost all of their production is going to come through the air in garbage time. So it's just, that's what I'm really looking for is, right, just your reception upside, particularly if you're from the losing side. If I'm going with an onslaught script. Love Rondale Moore. Tre'Quan Smith, he was a little bit more active last week because of opportunity. He's a little bit more expensive now, so I don't think he's nearly as good a play as he would have been given the injury situation before. Robbie Anderson, don't know how much he's going to play, so I'm going to wait on that. If the beat reporter says he's going to be active, is going to play like all the snaps, then $5,600, we're going to have to love him. But as of right now, he's probably not going to play very much. Mark Ingram, he's worth a few shots in large field GPPs if you want to, but he's extremely touchdown dependent at $5,200. Marquez Callaway at $4,800. I prefer him a little bit more than somebody like a Tre'Quan Smith just because of the price tag. They're going to have a very similar role, right? You're going to have the number one Chris Olave, and then these two are going to kind of be mixed in as the X wide receiver from time to time. So he's $4,800. He's just a little bit cheaper. It saves you a lot more salary. You're usually able to spend for an extra stud if you go to him rather than somebody there in the near 7K range like a Tre'Quan Smith. So yeah, like Marquez Callaway. The kickers are both viable. Not going to play a ton of them though. You guys know me, I'm not a huge kicker guy, but I'll mix them in because they are valuable, particularly in a onslaught. In that lower scoring sort of situation, the kickers are even more viable, or particularly when we're going with the double negative, right, where both teams are kind of stinking it up, they're even more valuable in that situation as well, because, when you're not scoring touchdowns, maybe you're inefficient in the red zone, that's adding opportunities for these kickers. And that's why I tend to like them in those inefficient sort of scripts. Juwan Johnson, like solid piece of value at $3,000. He's seen a lot of time for tight end at the Saints. And then AJ Green, $2,600. As long as Robbie Anderson isn't going to factor largely into the offense, I think that AJ Green might be worth a few looks there. Just to give you a few idea, there's a few running backs that might be introduced into the projections as the week goes on. Like I said, we have James Conner and Eno Benjamin both as questionable. If one or both of them are rolled out, there's going to be 2, maybe even 3 extra value options introduced into the slate. Whereas if one or even both of them ends up starting, those backups values are really limited. I mean, maybe, you have 1 or 2 guys that get 4 or 5 touches in the game. But yeah, these running backs for the Cardinals are going to be a huge piece of news to keep an eye on, along with the news with Robbie Anderson. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for the Thursday night football preview. Before you hop on out of here, smash that like button, and also go ahead and comment down below who your favorite captain is for the slate. For me, it's gotta be Zach Ertz just because of that price tag, $7,000, right? Use him at captain, it's $10,500. But go ahead and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And as per usual, we'll be doing content throughout the week. We'll have a video for Monday Night Football, potentially a strategy video coming out throughout the weekend. I will be at a golf tournament here, so the weekly live stream on Friday may have to be at a different time than usual. I'll go ahead and post that on my social media, but we'll try and get all the usual content out, just might be at a little bit of a different time because of my traveling plans and of course being at the golf course all day. So best of luck this Thursday, guys. Best of luck this weekend with all of your week 7 lineups. If you're playing golf too, I know a lot of my followers play both golf and NFL. Best of luck on that side, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.